The wide receiver room is the best position for Ole Miss, and PFF agrees with me, by the way. And Ole Miss is just one game away from hosting a super regional.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we'll discuss Jace Matthews, who had an official visit to Ole Miss over the weekend. He's part of that stacked 2026 Mississippi wide receiver class. But here's the thing. PFF has rated Ole Miss as the number 4 wide receiver room in the entire country for 2025. So when you combine this year's loaded wide receiver group with an elite in-state athletic class and Lane Kiffin's favorite recruiting position, it's clear that Austin Simmons will have top-tier targets now and for years to come at Ole Miss. In our second segment, we break down the Ole Miss baseball team's exhausting but critical win over Georgia Tech. It was a must-have win, and they got it. Finally, we talk about the Rebels' blowout win over Murray State and how the Rebels are just one game away from hosting a super regional in Oxford. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to our insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy, who's probably pretty sad right now, offer even more perspectives on college football, the SEC, and all things Ole Miss. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. The wide receiver room is set for a breakout. It is the best room, to me, on Ole Miss's football team. You hear me talk all the time about Austin Simmons. You've heard me talk about different position groups, but the wide receiver room is simply different at Ole Miss. And it's comes from the fact that there's so many different type athletes ready for them. You know, there's DeSean Stribling, who has a chance to be a freakish outside wide receiver. There's Harrison Wallace III, who is a speedster. Caden Lee doesn't drop a single thing. Super transfers like Caleb Odom with all the potential in the world to be a DK Metcalf type wide receiver. You got the young guys, the young bucks coming in. Winston Watkins, who's a super slot receiver, the relative of Sammy Watkins, who ended up coming to Ole Miss. Samari Reed, again, another one of those Florida in the pipeline coming to Oxford. Then you've got Dylan Alford, who we're going to talk about him a couple of times this week, but he has a chance to be really, really good. And Caleb Cunningham, the top player in Mississippi, who's on campus as well. The wide receiver room is a whole bunch of position players that have a chance to be really good. And they're all different, but they complement each other. When you add those with the tight ends, Austin Simmons has some toys. Austin Simmons has the chance to be a 1-1 level quarterback. He's the most talented quarterback potentially that Lane Kiffin has ever signed. But the success of Austin Simmons is going to come down to this wide receiver unit. They are all good in real short bursts within 10 to 20 yards of the line of scrimmage. With Austin Simmons' quick processing ability, that is a big thing. And when you have a security blanket like Caden Lee, who in my opinion has a chance to catch 100 passes in the course of the season, because we all know that Lane Kiffin feeds his stars, the wide receiver unit is poised for a breakout. And don't take my word for it. This is from PFF a couple of weeks ago. The top wide receiver units in the entire country. Number 1 is the Ohio State Buckeyes. That's Jeremiah Smith. They love those guys. There's always good wide receivers at Ohio State. Number 2, the Auburn Tigers. They have young ones, but they have good ones coming in to Auburn. And whenever they have like Eric Singleton that could take them to the next level. Jackson Arnold has some toys to work with. The Clemson Tigers, number 3, they have a big-time quarterback with big-time wide receivers. They could be pretty special. Then you have the Ole Miss Rebels, and then the Alabama Crimson Tide, who has Ryan Williams, who, in case nobody knows, he is old enough to vote now, and we should all be excited about him doing exactly what every other 18-year-old in this country can do. But PFF has rated Ole Miss as number 4. Now, we could go into the breakdowns of what's going on, but the important thing is they recognize the game. They absolutely recognize the game. DeSean Stribling, who had nearly 900 yards over the course of last season, playing for Oklahoma State, a team that was quarterback challenged. Alan Bowman was the guy on that roster throwing passes. Alan Bowman was not a very good quarterback, but DeSean Stribling had nearly 900 yards of receiving last season. You have Harrison Wallace, the wide receiver out of Penn State, who had a perfect NFL level passer rating as far as catching passes in the middle of the tic-tac-toe board. And anything downfield he struggled with, despite being a burner. That was more quarterback problems. I'm not a huge fan of Drew Aller. If you listen to my show, you understand that. Caleb Odom, transferred over from Alabama, is built like a tank. He's 6'5", 220 pounds, and can run. He is going to be a matchup problem for teams in the red zone. Then you have Caden Lee, who can catch all the balls. All of these receivers make 2025 a very good prospect for Austin Simmons. But what about 2026? Ole Miss got an official visit over the course of the weekend with Jace Matthews, the wide receiver out of the coast. I think it was Greene County down in Leakesville. Visit Ole Miss. Said Ole Miss made a big move in the course of his visit. And he didn't commit on his visit, nor would he, because if he went to Hattiesburg, if he went to Oak Grove, if he went to a 7A level high school in Mississippi, he would be a no-doubter 5-star. The fact that he goes to Greene County means that he got hidden a little bit. And the camp circuit, he has to elevate what's going on in the rankings. But even now, he's in the top 50, top 60, top 70 of the recruiting rankings, and he will continue to ascend. With Tristan Keys looking like he's going to go elsewhere, Jace Matthews and Xavier McDonald become much bigger pieces. And when you look at the wide receiver units that Lane Kiffin has put together, the wide receivers that were so good at Alabama a couple years ago, he always had players like Marquise Lee at USC. The wide receiver position is kind of quietly his passion position, because that is where he cut his teeth coming up through the coaching ranks. He was originally a wide receivers coach. If he stays at Ole Miss and continues to win the way he's winning, the wide receiver group is going to get better and better and better and better. I like the idea that Jace Matthews is going to end up at Ole Miss, period. Xavier McDonald, I like that as well. But with the young receivers coming in, I'm curious, the Winston Watkins, Samari Reed, the Caleb Cunninghams, I want to see how they do on the field with some of the transfers they brought in, like DeSean Stribling and Harrison Wallace. Ole Miss has a chance to be really good at the wide receiver position, not just this year where PFF says they're 4th in the nation, but in the foreseeable future as long as Lane Kiffin is the coach. And that should make Ole Miss football fans very happy. But by the way, if you're an Ole Miss baseball fan, Ole Miss versus Georgia Tech and Ole Miss versus Murray State were two completely different games. The Rebels are heating up. We'll talk about that next. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That is where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop managing your money and you actually start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save a lot more money. Instead of juggling multiple apps, I can use Monarch to check my finances, track spending, and even plan those long-term goals. And managing the money with my partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all of the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. So it was an interesting day yesterday. Ole Miss had to win both games. There was no choice. They were coming through the losers bracket. It was loser go home for Ole Miss. And they had Georgia Tech in their first game of the day. And that was a Power 4 program. That's the ACC regular season champion. And it just honestly wasn't an enjoyable game. I did not enjoy that game at all. It's something to where, you know, Ole Miss would get up by a run or two and Georgia Tech would come back, and it was so back and forth and it was so intense and it was a chippy. And you look at that game and you're like, this is going to end poorly for Ole Miss. And I guess the good news is I can record my show early, but it did not look good for Ole Miss for about 7 innings of that ball game. I was on the Locked On Ole Miss Discord server talking that game. We were having basically our game thread. And it was one of those things. It's like, what is going on with this? And Ole Miss used nearly every pitcher that they had. Mason Nichols went in, and it felt like some of the arms that they needed to use got used in that game. And you're like, where does Ole Miss go from here? They still have to beat Murray State twice. Were they planning on a slugfest to make it through? They had to get through Murray State, and they've proven over the course of the regional that they've been able to outslug Ole Miss in the first game. They were able to outslug Georgia Tech. So would Ole Miss be able to outslug Murray State? And last night, boy, did they ever. I think the one time this season that I've seen that the crowd out in the outfield got to that exaggerated, excited level was in the game against Murray State, to where they went back to back to back in the home run department. Ole Miss just ate up Murray State pitching. And it makes you wonder going into this, and we're going to talk about this and the potential for a super regional in the next segment as well. But you really have to wonder if they have the pitching even necessary to pull out this game. This game 7, this big game, this massive contest will be a big step forward to prove that Ole Miss has the pitching depth that for 7 months Derek Van Griff told me they had. Ole Miss baseball fans, I'm talking about the hardcores, the really hardcores, the ones that know about several players on this team, that whenever they walk out, most of us are like, no, who is that? Must be a scrub. And they're like, oh, no, he has excellent potential. He has a 60 level fastball or something like that. And I'm like, okay, I will pay attention to what you're saying. In this game, they didn't need to do that. They didn't need to pop it up. They didn't need to do anything, because their bats completely took over this game. And it started with Will Furness. Will Furness was a major factor in this game against Murray State with 2 home runs. And then you had the back-to-back, which was Furness, Udemark, and Humphrey on the Isaac Humphrey on the back-to-back. Ole Miss ended up with 19 hits on the game, and they were able to just completely outslug the Murray State Racers, setting up potentially a game 7 and a host of a super regional against the Duke Blue Devils. Again, we will get to that in just a second. Ole Miss still has to manage to win the game 7. It's a big deal. But I will say this. When Ole Miss did the back-to-back-to-back thing, you saw the body language of Murray State for the first time. It fell. It fell down really quick. And all of a sudden, for the first time, they didn't have the confidence that they were going to win the game, because Murray State came into this game tonight thinking they were going to win. Nay, knowing they were going to win the game. And Ole Miss in that game, the way that they won that game, took that confidence away to the point where the first 4 innings for Murray State was much different than the Murray State that you saw after that. There's still some good players, still some good hitters, and they can knock the cover off the ball. They can do all of that. But the overarching confidence that came with what they were doing went away. And what you have in Oxford is the potential for a reverse Tennessee Tech type situation. I think Murray State needed to win last night's game. A win by Ole Miss, and especially a win in dominating fashion, would set up a game 7 to where a Power 4 program is probably going to have more pitching than a mid-major program. So Murray State's pitching is going to be down. This is their 4th game. And if you saw the game last night, which of course you did, you saw that Murray State's pitching, it looked pretty sketchy from time to time. So with that, it should be advantage Ole Miss in that game 7. Again, Murray State can hit the ball, and you have to hit the zone against Murray State and stay in plus counts. I've never seen more 3-ball counts than with this Ole Miss pitching staff. They have to be careful to avoid those plus hitters counts so that they know that a fastball is going to be put right down the middle that they can tee off on. If they do that, Ole Miss is going to be in trouble. But if Ole Miss can fill up the zone, have strikes, get into good pitchers counts, all of a sudden Murray State hitting is not going to be at the same level as what we expect. Ole Miss needs to play a smart baseball game. For instance, when the number 9 hitter is up to bat and you have 2 outs, you make him put it in play. You do not walk him and set it up with the number 1 player who's probably the best hitter on either team. You have to play smart. If Ole Miss plays smart, if Ole Miss fills up the zone, if Ole Miss cuts down on the defensive mistakes. Ole Miss didn't play well against Georgia Tech, and Ole Miss didn't play well against Western Kentucky, and Ole Miss didn't play well against Murray State in the very first game. Ole Miss is starting to play well. Ole Miss is starting to get hot. And if they're able to do that, if they are able to string together one more win, they're looking at hosting a super regional in Oxford, which would be unbelievably crazy. In our final segment, Ole Miss is just 1 win away from hosting that super regional, thanks to Duke's upset in the Athens regional. All right, let's say Ole Miss takes care of business against Murray State, and that's a big if, because we've talked about shorts in the last little bit of how it could be difficult for Ole Miss, because Ole Miss can beat absolutely anybody. We've seen Ole Miss at its absolute best, but Ole Miss has a very low floor for a team that has such a high ceiling. You talk about the distance between the two, it's probably bigger than every other team in the NCAA regionals right now. But if Ole Miss pulls out that win against Murray State, and they get the Duke Blue Devils in Oxford in a super regional, kind of sets up pretty nice. We'll have Derek Vandegrift on to talk about what is going to happen in that super regional, if and when it happens. We will talk about how the regional happen. You lose the first game, you make your way going all the way through the losers bracket to the final game and the chance to win it. Southern Mississippi is doing the same thing. They went all the way through the losers bracket after losing to the number 4 seed all the way through to a Monday game. You have a chance to have Southern Miss hosting a super regional. with the Vanderbilt Commodores and the Texas Longhorns going out. Vanderbilt's matched with Southern Mississippi. This regional cycle is interesting. Tennessee lost to Wake Forest. Ole Miss has a chance to get to Omaha from their home field for the first time. That's a pretty big deal. That's a really big deal. Let's just say that. It's a really big deal because every trip to Omaha by Mike Bianco was on the away field. It was at the Louisiana Lafayette. It was at Miami or at Southern Mississippi. It was road games where the Rebs got hot and went on a run. This would be the first opportunity for Ole Miss to potentially get there via their home field. And that's pretty cool. All of this has a chance to be pretty cool because with the Duke Blue Devils beating the Georgia Bulldogs, that took basically, if Ole Miss wins their regional, they're going to host a super, to my knowledge. But we'll see exactly how that goes over the next couple of weeks. You have to handle the Murray State Racers a little bit later on today to get there. It's going to be a big afternoon. I think Ole Miss is going to be out in force. The fans are. And those fans are going to be making a ton of noise. And the body language of Murray State, the first time something goes wrong, are they going to be mentally tough enough to handle the avalanche that could be coming their way? Will the Duke Blue Devils be able to handle that same avalanche coming through? Because ACC baseball is fine. That's great. It's nothing like they're going to see at Swayze Field. It's nothing like the baseball atmosphere in Oxford, Mississippi. Ole Miss is one win away from hosting their very own super regional at Swayze Field against the Duke Blue Devils, who's a good team. They're good. All teams in the NCAA tournament are good, but it's a team that Ole Miss should be able to beat. It's a team that Hunter Elliott's going to take the mound in the first game, and you're probably going to walk in a 1-0 lead going forward. The odds are going to be stacked incredibly in your favor with a win over Murray State. Again, I'm calling this right now. It's a reverse Tennessee Tech. Ole Miss went through the losers bracket, beat Murray State twice, even though they can knock the ball over the field and get to a super regional. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be a very cool thing. I'm sorry about this show being abbreviated, but let's be honest. It was a late night last night, and we're in the off season of college football, which means I'm only required to provide 3 shows a week for your channel. I'm going to continue to do my normal thing because I don't listen to stuff like that, but we'll see exactly how it goes. But thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes around college football. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.